Hey there and welcome. My name is Pete and this is a perhaps long overdue channel update in which I want to share with you some major news. If you have been following the channel closely, you may have noticed that I have not posted a channel update since July, and that's mostly because I really struggled for a long time with how exactly I wanted to share these news with all of you. And let's get one thing out of the way first. While I do have to apologize for the somewhat clickbaity title of this video, it is true, I quit, just not YouTube. As some of you may know, I've been working in academia for the majority of this channel's existence. There's many words to describe that job: scientist, research assistant, or just plain researcher, but that's semantics. In any case, for more than 6 years, I've been working at the university, doing research, teaching students, helping organize the everyday goings-on of such an institution, and for the most part I had a lot of fun doing it. Still, there were factors that over the years made me become increasingly frustrated with it all. Please note though, this is only the experience of me, a single individual. Others might perceive things differently, and I do not intend to generalize. Now, on the surface, working in academia in Germany offers a tremendous amount of personal freedom and self-realization. The job is highly intrinsically motivated, and while there is of course a hierarchy, I was always granted a lot of freedom to pursue the project I was interested in. Unfortunately though, I also perceived an immense pressure to publish scientific papers and to overall put my name out there to be seen in the scientific community. This high expectation for a constant stream of publications often left me feeling that the focus was more on quantity than quality, which detracted from the joy of conducting what I perceived to be meaningful research and conflicted with that aforementioned freedom to pursue the projects I was truly interested in. That by itself, however, is of course no deal-breaker. In fact, it's unrealistic to expect to always be able to do whatever the hell you want, especially in a job paid for by the state, and thus by taxpayers. Now, the other large part of the job, and definitely my favorite part, is working with students. And unfortunately, over the years, I perceived a shift in that aspect as well. Let me be very clear here, I do not blame the students for this. This is more a fault of the system as a whole. In Germany, pursuing a university degree has over the years become more and more the default path for young people, rather than a deliberate choice based on personal passions and interests. This obviously reflects in the mindset of students, many of whom seem to approach their studies out of necessity rather than genuine interest, and for me this sadly made teaching less and less fulfilling. As you can most likely imagine, there is a huge difference between working with people who are genuinely interested in what you have to teach and working with those who are mostly only there to get their degree, because that is what's expected of them. Finally, the fact that pursuing a career in academia requires a willingness to sacrifice and to be flexible that, in my opinion, just goes beyond what I'm willing to give. Contracts are always short-term, and even getting the oh-so-prestigious PhD does not necessarily change that. In fact, for most of my colleagues, establishing a career after getting that PhD was the most stressful part. There's no guarantee you'll now be offered a long-term contract, you're expected to relocate or to split your places of residence, and you're competing with some of the absolute best in your field, those who have sacrificed almost everything, for those very few positions that offer long-term stability, and that doesn't even mean they're well paid. And don't get me wrong, we are not talking about young professionals here. These are people who sometimes had been working in academia for more than 10 years, some of the brightest minds I had a pleasure of working with, and who, because of these systemic limitations, were never able to settle down or start a family, and always had to weigh their personal life against their professional one. Enter me, Pete Complete, working in academia and also running a YouTube channel. I think you can see how the aforementioned requirements are generally not inviting for someone who's also trying to maintain a self-employed business at the same time. Now, to be fair, that can be said for almost any scenario in which someone is working 2 jobs, but when I made the decision to reduce my working hours at the university to be able to focus more time on YouTube, in hindsight that was probably already an early nail in the coffin for my academic career. Still, it took me many more years and lots of therapy sessions to realize that I was stressing and burning myself out over trying to fulfill the requirements of both jobs, which again are so intrinsically motivated that most of those requirements were actually my own, but that doesn't necessarily make it any easier. So last year I made a decision. I had to make a decision. Only one job from here on out. It seemed a difficult decision at first, but then became a surprisingly easy one. I just could not fathom abandoning this channel, a channel that I had built from the ground up, a channel that I can honestly say is one of my proudest achievements in life. And so in late 2024, I let another one of those short-term contracts at the university run out, and like the video title says, I quit. And now I'm a full-time content creator. Take a moment to let that sink in. I know that I'm just a guy from the internet for most of you, but imagine you start uploading a few videos to YouTube, always having this completely outlandish dream in the back of your head, this far-fetched thought of, what if? What if I could one day do this as my main job? And then it all comes true. Well, here I am. Almost 9 years have passed since I released my first video, and while this is now what I do for a living, and while I am extremely grateful to have made it this far, I also know that I have chosen a career path that is perhaps in many ways equally, if not more demanding than the one I just left. Which brings me to a harsh and uncomfortable truth of being a full-time content creator. I now have to rely on nothing but this channel to pay my bills. And honestly, that's frightening. Especially considering that even mundane things like getting a cold and not uploading for a week are immediately noticeable when it comes to how much YouTube pays me at the end of the month. That's why I'm so grateful to have a loyal community of Patreon supporters, and it's also why I have now decided to activate channel memberships. Now, this may not be a huge thing or even matter for some of you, but in these channel updates I like to explain myself and how I run this channel for the sake of full transparency. My intention with these channel memberships is essentially just to reflect the Patreon tiers. I know that Patreon is not everyone's cup of tea, it's a separate platform, and this way it happens all on YouTube, but of course the Patreon itself will remain and not go anywhere. Consider this a broadening of the existing support system, if you will, an extension of things that more or less already exist rather than something entirely new. So let's briefly dive in. To make these channel memberships as accessible as possible, the first tier is literally the cheapest option that YouTube allows for. For just $1 per month, or whatever your local currency equivalent is, you can show your support for my work. You'll get access to the exclusive Pete Complete Discord, where you can chat with me and others from the community. You can use exclusive emojis, and you'll get a nice icon next to your name to show off your membership status. If that is not enough for you, the next tier is the naming rights tier, offering all perks from the first one, plus naming rights for anyone or anything we might encounter in one of my videos. A pawn or animal in RimWorld, a character in an RPG, a player in a sports game, a weapon, an item, whatever there is to name, I will draw from the list of members in this tier, as well as from those over on Patreon. And for those of you willing to go above and beyond, the third membership tier is the Executive Producer tier, once again including all perks from the previous two, plus your name listed at the end of all my videos. Just watch this one till the end to see what that looks like. Now, while I am first and foremost hoping that I can offer a little something to make these tiers worth it, I am of course by no means expecting anyone to become a channel member. Any support you can give obviously goes a long way, but it's always going to be just a little extra to show your appreciation for what I do. I don't want to put any content behind a paywall so that Pete Complete is and will be free for everyone. And if you like to give a little extra on top of that, then I'd appreciate it, but it is by no means expected of you. Now, if you are familiar with the Pete Complete Patreon, which offers these reward tiers too, you may have noticed some slight differences, and I'd like to be transparent about those and not just sneak them by you. First of all, the naming rights tier on Patreon is currently priced a little lower than the one on YouTube. That will change next month, when the Patreon tier will match the price of the YouTube tier. Since the inception of the Pete Complete Patreon 6 years ago, I have never once raised the price of a single tier, but unfortunately recent times made a change necessary. My everyday cost of living is increasing too, and YouTube's ad payouts are not really catching up to inflation either. Don't worry though, if you are already subscribed to the naming rights tier on Patreon, nothing will change for you. Your Patreon bill will not suddenly increase. This change will only affect new patrons joining after February 1st. That also means that if you want to grab the naming rights perks for the lower price, you can still do so and benefit long term. Just head over to patreon.com/PeteComplete for more information. Secondly, you may have noticed the lack of a postcard tier, something that does exist over on Patreon. This has two reasons, the first being that grabbing a shipping address from YouTube channel members is a bit more of a hassle compared to grabbing one from Patreon supporters. The second reason is that the postcard tier is by far the least popular of my reward tiers on Patreon. Contrary to other rewards, like permanent Discord access, naming rights for a character who may appear in multiple videos over weeks and months, or your name listed at the end of every video, the postcard is just a one-time benefit, and therefore most likely just not as interesting to most people. That's why YouTube channel memberships will not have this tier, and why I will also remove it from the Patreon in February. So again, if you want to grab a postcard, there is still time to join the Patreon tier until then, and also once again, nothing will change for existing patrons. You will all receive your postcards, I won't kick any of you out, all other perks will still remain as well. The postcard tier will simply be hidden, and no further members can join after February 1st. Finally, YouTube channel memberships do not include the merchandise tier, simply because of the aforementioned issues with reliably grabbing a shipping address. I know that there is theoretically an if this then that connection that could possibly be used to facilitate that, but from what I've gathered, it works semi-reliably at best. And I apologize, but semi-reliably is just not what I want to work with when it comes to fulfilling the rewards of your support, especially not on a tier of this level. So that one will remain a Patreon exclusive for the time being. So there you have it. It might seem like everything's changing, but I can assure you, my goal is actually just for things to remain exactly as they are, and just offering a broader access to ways in which you can support me, if you so desire. Again though, please only do so if you feel comfortable with it. It is certainly true that the income from Patreon, and now hopefully channel memberships too, is a lot more reliable than the highly fluctuating amounts that YouTube pays me for video views, but I don't want you to feel like you need to pay me so that I can keep doing this. Any support is greatly appreciated, but again, please do not go above your means. Speaking of not going above one's means, I'd like to finish on a brief talk about expectations. Yes, I am now a full-time YouTuber, and I can dedicate more time to the channel, but please don't expect me to drastically increase my video output immediately just because of that. I'd like to use this newfound time and freedom to explore a bit, try out some video concepts I've come up with over the years and never got around to making, dive back into doing YouTube Shorts, which for RimWorld Anomaly were well received and helped the channel grow, and overall just claim back a bit of that work-life balance I've been so sorely missing these last few years. That's not to say that new and exciting projects aren't on the horizon, quite on the contrary, but I've found that it's best to manage expectations before I put too much pressure on myself yet again. And that's really all I have to say in this one. I'll be honest, I'm still a little scared of how all of this is gonna go. I am by no means a huge content creator with hundreds of thousands of followers, but I'm hopeful that it's all going to work out, and I'm hopeful that you'll join me for this next chapter of Pete Complete. Before we wrap up the video though, I'd like to give a long overdue shout out to all the new Patreon supporters who have joined since the last channel update video. In the future, this list will then of course also include new channel members. So as always, in no particular order, I want to say thank you to Aurelo Thunkalatha, SteadMS Ltd, Mark S., Arcanix, Goethes Pop, Laura, Zephyr Demiurge, Waltbox, Phlegmathy Crevice, K-Tiger, Adam, Pile of Garbage, Jean-Paul Farage, Julius, Alexis, David W., Benjamin Johansson, San Marino, Neo X Alpha, Cosmic Notepin, SC Gabrius, Matt Palliser Kehoe, Steph Merritt, Vice Grips 82, Zip, Stanislav G, Booker, Ortim Killam, Hunter, Jenny Carter, Michael Richards, Synthetic Everything, Eric Jensen, A Name, Eric, David Aman, MVP John Scott, Leah, Isa Okami, Michelle, Big Man Johan, Sarge Pepper, Space Drake, Caves, Nahi, Eric Skinner, and last but not least, Chad Burt. I really hope I pronounced all of your names correctly. Above all though, thank you all so much for your support. And with that, let's make the cut in a video that ended up being a lot longer than I expected it to be. Exciting times are ahead for Pete Complete, but have a little patience. We'll take this slow and steady, quality over quantity. You know how I like to work. If you have any questions regarding the upcoming changes, please leave a comment down below or send me an email to pete@petecomplete.com. I'll try to clarify whatever I can so that those who'd like to support me can make an informed decision. I also hope that you enjoyed the update video and this not entirely brief look behind the scenes. If you did, then leave a thumbs up, that too already helps me out. Of course, if you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, you can subscribe to stay up to date on all the exciting projects that are coming up, become one of the very first Pete Complete channel members here on YouTube, or join the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.